Welcome to Lesson 7 of Quick and Effective Environment Illustration. In this lesson, we've moved up to the foreground now. We've refined the background, the middle ground. We've added a little bit of color to the background and the middle ground. And now we've got to refine out this foreground and really bring it to the level that we've brought this middle ground to. And that means carving out these shapes. That means basically painting the silhouette of everything that stands against the background. So the silhouettes of these trees, the silhouettes of the top of this foreground ridge. So I'm going to be going back and forth with laying down opaque color with a textured brush, with a good ragged line, a good crazy edge, and then come back and erase out. And just use that technique of back and forth, laying down a little, carving out a little, to build up the look of pine trees, the look of these trees at this distance. And that's one of the keys in landscape painting, environment work. When you're showing a landscape element, like in this case, this tree, this pine tree, you got to have a technique and a way to treat it when you're seeing it at different distances. You know, those pine trees in the middle ground, you can't see them as trees at all. You can only see it as a tree ridge, as a forest, as a texture, as an indication that there are trees back there. And here in the foreground, we can actually make out clearly one tree, two tree, how many there are, where their trunks are, where they're thicker in foliage, where they're lighter. You know, we can start to see details. And if we're drawing this tree right up close to the viewer, you would have to paint every needle. You know, you'd have to represent so much more and see such a clear image of it. And keeping that in mind when you're doing landscapes is really key. And it's really key when you're refining the edges, because the tree at this distance looks different than the tree further back in the middle ground. Even if this tree was 100 feet closer, you would see it as a whole differently. And keeping aware of how far away you are from the element you're drawing or painting, in addition to any atmospheric differences, any fog or the darkness or the lightness of the environment. You know, these things change how much detail and how clear the edge is and how refined things are. And the key to making it read really well right away is nailing that, getting that right. Where at this distance, you know, you can see bunches of needles, but you probably can't make out an individual needle of this pine tree yet. So by using a brush that comes across that way, this brush is, you know, it's a texture. It's really three splotches, and you change the spacing, change how that's coming out, how that brush tip is getting laid down, and you've got an effective texture brush, and you just keep varying that and slowly build up the texture you're looking for. And again, when I'm making these marks, I'm judging the image from its thumbnail smaller version. So things can be sloppy and loose and really almost abstract when you're zoomed into 100%. But when you zoom out and take in the image as a whole, and you can zoom in, when you're zoomed in at 100%, things look almost abstract. Things can be sloppy and loose, and the texture is really, really apparent. But you zoom out all the way and take in the picture as a whole. And if these marks read as a pine tree just over the ridge, then that's a quick and effective way of making marks to get that to get that image to read. And see my technique of bringing out a little, carving back in, bringing out. And you develop a feel for it, and you kind of develop a sensitivity to if you put a mark here, it changes the weight of the tree, it changes the balance. And so for every mark you put, you might have to put a corresponding mark on the other side, or lower or higher, to balance it out. And so that's why there's a lot of back and forth as I work that balance out to get it feeling right, just resting well in the picture. And you look at the ref for inspiration for the dynamics of how those marks are. But you don't just want to copy it, because then you're just taking that tree and placing it in this image. But by putting marks down and reacting to them and building it up, you're creating this new image, using a tree as a picture of a tree as inspiration, as a guideline. But you can really create this environment and make it your own when you react to the marks you're putting down. Now that I've got a good block in, I'm just going to indicate before making a separate light layer and really carving out these lights, I'm going to block in lightly for myself to get a sense of how the lights are going to change here, what the color is going to change to, what the value is going to change to. And I've just got to put this down to make sure that all my values are correct and everything's reading right. And I'm going to just erase it back out and leave the subtlest trace of it as a texture underneath. But you can see how I've simply locked the transparency of the layer that I've been carving out. So we worked up the silhouette of this tree, and now it's easy to go in and you can paint any color you want, just any texture, any color right over the top of it, and build it up slowly and not worry anymore about the outline. It's the foundation is being set, and once it's set, we can move on and really start to bring the picture to life with color and texture. So I'm going to finish up refining these tree shapes, and then in the next lesson, we're going to move on to really refining out that foreground tree, and we'll save that for lesson 8. I'll see you there.